Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Power Driven Diesel. So today we're going to be doing a full install on a 3rd gen Cummins compound turbo setup. So I'm going to walk you through everything that we need to do from removing the battery cables to draining the coolant. I will, in my video, have the cab off so that way you can see better, but this is a job that was absolutely designed to be done with the cab on. I actually designed this setup and built it with the cab on. So it's something that can very be easily done, but for my sake of filming, I need you guys to be able to see what we're doing. So I'm going to remove the cab. So we'll walk through every little baby step of what we need to do, but for the most part, this is a straightforward thing. It's something you do in your driveway over a weekend and adds a whole lot of fun and decreased EGTs to your truck. So let's get to work. Alrighty, with the cab off, you guys can kind of see everything that's going to be in here. Like I said, this is all stuff that can be very easily done with the cab on. It's just I can't show you all the fine-tuning things with it on. So what we're going to start off first is we're going to remove all of the old stuff that attaches to the back of the turbo. So essentially this clamp that attaches it directly to the HE351, the downpipe clamp, we're going to get rid of this totally. And then we're also going to remove this heater hose. And so we'll get to that point. Okay, after we got these clamps loose, now we got to work on this blue little piece of pipe. So we're just going to get these spring clamps off, and then hopefully that'll allow us to slip this out. This truck, the bolt, the nut that usually holds this bracket on right here, is actually off of it already. As you can see, it's loose. Normally these are tight, so you do have a bolt you have to remove there. Okay, now with a little bit of finesse, we're going to try and get this pipe loose. And then just like that, she is out. Make sure you hold on to all of your clamps, don't lose them, as many of them will be reused. Okay, the next pieces to be removed are going to be these bolts. You need to remove this heat shield because the hot pipe is going to come up right here. Okay, removing these bolts is nothing to be concerned about because this gasket is still under tons of pressure from all these other bolts, so don't worry about this gasket. You can remove those without any issues. They'll be tightened up right away as soon as we get the bracket on here. One thing I do want to make a note of is this Egt probe is going to be in the way wrong position for our hot pipe. So what we need to do is remove this. We'll have to put a plug in this hole. You can weld it shut, whatever is easier for you. I'll probably just end up plugging it. We're going to put the Egt probe right up on top. Or you can put it right here. Let me show you why this is going to be an issue. Because it's going to sit right where our hot pipe is at. And this hot pipe is as tight as I can get it to the exhaust manifold. So it's got to just be relocated right up on top, or it can even go right here. Just can't go right there. Just because of the nature of pulling the cap, I did have to pull the intake out, but I did reinstall it so you guys can see this is the very first thing we got to remove in here. So first we're going to remove the intake air temp sensor. We're going to remove this hose clamp. And then we're just going to get the intake out of the way. You'll see that we have this boot right here. This you don't have to remove. It is highly recommended that you replace your boots. So right now is a good time to just pull this boot out and you can replace it on here. That's it for here. So now we'll move on to the back. The next thing we need to do is remove the oil drain plug that's already in the block. We've just got a freeze plug in here that we've got to knock out. So we need to clean this out really well. So I'm going to grab some brake clean and just a brush and we'll get this really clean and then I'll show you how to do it. Okay, just blow it out with some air. Want to make sure it's clean as you can. It's going to go directly into the oil pan. Okay, next you're going to want to remove the filter, or you can do this before. Okay, next you're just going to want to grab a little drill bit. Something that's not too big. I do recommend changing the oil after you do this because you will get some oil shavings down into the pan. Okay, next you just are going to try and find something that you can get into the hole. I have a file that I've got that I can screw into the hole. This is just so we don't lose it. So whether it's a screw or something else, and then we're going to grab a punch, we're going to push it down into the pan, and then hopefully we'll be able to pull it back up. Like so. Okay everybody, that finishes up the disassembly of this whole project. So now we get to start throwing parts on. This is when it starts getting fun. Alright, now we're to the fun part. We get to start installing parts. We got a full table full of stuff here. Of course we got our big pieces, downpipe, hot pipe, turbo, our fancy little red pieces. Something that I want to point out so that way all of you guys know, there is a difference in these heater lines. So this is that part we just removed, and for the 03 to 05s, they fall into this line right here. So as you can see, it's mostly straight, just has one line and then comes straight up. The 05 to 07 has a little bit more elaborate of a line. And so we need to be paying attention when we go to order these things. It's not the 06, 07 guys that are going to have an issue. It's going to be the 04.5 05 guys. Mostly the 04.5 guys are going to be the struggle. And then of course, all of the manual lines are the same. So if you have a manual truck, don't worry about any of what I just said. But what I like to do first, when we first get a kit, is we want to go through and we do a quick inventory. We want to count, make sure everything's there. We want to look through the receipt that we got and it counts out all the parts and pieces that are supposed to be here. Guys, we do the best we can. Sometimes we're not perfect. I don't want to get the phone call, hey, my truck's apart. I need this next day, aired ASAP. Do yourself a favor and count everything before you get started on your project. So do a quick inventory. And then what I like to do next is we're going to start assembling things. We're going to put the oil feed and oil drains onto the turbo. We're going to get the clamp set up for the hot pipe, interstage pipe, and downpipe. And then that's pretty much it for the assembly on the bench. So let's get to the assembly part. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to install our flanges together. And if you have a vise, is the best way to do this. Just pinch either side of it in, take your 15/16 wrench, tighten them together. Okay, one last thing we have to do as part of our disassembly is this is your factory heater hose. We do need to take this factory elbow off. We are going to reuse it. And that should be it for this. We're not going to reuse this. We supply another hose in the kit. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take the elbow that we had off of our old heater pipe. We're going to remove it and install it on our new one. What we're also going to do is take our hose clamps and we're going to put them on the factory heater pipe going to the heat exchanger. Okay, with our hose clamps in place here, we are now going to move and put this on the front heater pipe. This is a length of hose that we supply in your kit, and then we want to just place the hose clamps on it. Make sure they're easy to get to. Okay, then we are going to install our heater pipe. We're going to do that by placing it in behind the turbine, behind the exhaust manifold. And we're going to work it inside of your pipe. Okay, and then you're just going to take your 90 and just work it on to the other pipe. Then after you have all those in place, make sure you tighten up all your hose clamps. You can fully tighten these right now, so you can just be done with this. So go ahead and get that done. The next thing you're going to want to do is, I already had to remove this heat shield. You're going to want to cut it right here at this line. So you can cut it on either side. This, the bracket that we're going to install is actually going to get right in the way of this. So you can cut this off with a cut-off wheel, chop saw, whatever you have, bandsaw, I don't care. You just need to cut it off right here, right at the line where you can see where the factory has a line. And that should provide plenty of room for us to install it. After cutting it off, you're going to have little burrs on it. We're going to want to get these off, just so that way when you're moving around this, you don't have to worry about cutting your hands. And now we're ready to reinstall this with your factory hardware. Next, we are going to loosely install our bracket. So it's going to use these really long Allen-headed bolts with these spacers. And the way that it's going to go is bolt through the bracket, spacer on the back side, and then it's going to go on just like this. Right now we're going to leave these loose, so that way we can get our hot pipe on and make sure that everything fits the way it's supposed to. So what I recommend doing first is getting the clamp on. Sometimes you have to pull the nut all the way off, and then that way it normally just pops right on. Okay, then we're just going to seat this clamp by hand. There's not really any play in this clamp, like when we have forward and backward, but as soon as it's centered and you've got this nut just snug, it should really only roll around a little bit. The reason we're leaving all of this loose is because in our bracket here, we got to make sure those holes line up perfectly. So whether that's using some shims here, like just washers and placing it in there, so that way this always has a perfect seal. So long as this pipe has a perfect seal, you won't have any leaks. So we got to do whatever we can here to make sure this fits perfect. So spend a little bit of time here. At this point, you're going to take your 8mm Allen and you're going to snug those up. It needs to be a ball end. Factory torque on the exhaust manifold bolts is 35 foot-pounds. Next, we'll install our long studs that go in these two holes. As we can see, we've got two very differently sized studs. So the long studs are going to screw with the long end of the threads in the front two holes. And of course, short ones go in the back. Next, we're going to take our nuts that are supplied in the kit, and we're going to attach them to the studs that are now protruding into the bracket. We can take our 15mm wrench to snug those up. If you want a torque, it's 35 foot-pounds, but it's really just get them snug. Okay, what you want to do first is grab your oil bung, and we're going to coat a little bit of RTV on it. That way, this will kind of prevent it from wanting to spin in the bore when you go to put the oil line on, as well as give it a little lubrication to get down in to the block. Then, I'm just going to get it down, mostly placed in position. And if your oil filter is still off, great. If it's not, you're going to need to remove it again to be able to get a straight shot on this. What I've learned works best is using a 1-inch socket on an extension and then just hitting it in the hole with a hammer. Then we can go ahead and remove our cap. And that's that. Okay, next we're going to put our line on. You're going to screw it most of the way on, but you're going to leave it just a little loose so you can rotate it up and around and get it up into position. So it's sitting right here up against the hot pipe. And that way it'll be sitting right where it needs to be on the turbo. We're going to leave these loose for right now. We'll tighten them up after the turbo's on. Okay, next, take a 3/16 Allen. You're going to remove one of these plugs out of the top of the oil filter housing. And if you've got an extra hole to fill, that's 1/8" National pipe, this will fill it, like I have in the exhaust manifold. Alrighty, next, we're going to install our 1/8" National pipe thread fitting into the filter head. These only need to be snug, they don't have to be super tight. Then we can go ahead and install our line. So you'll see that your line has a straight end and a 90. So you're going to want to put the straight end on the filter head. This line, we can go ahead and just tighten it up right now. Okay, next, don't forget about your gasket, the T4 flange. Now we get to put the turbo on. Okay, now we get to install the turbo. One of the things I do recommend doing is loosening the two clamps that are on here, so each, the compressor and turbine side, will move independently of each other. Then grab our 4 bolts, nuts that are provided in the kit. Then take a 9/16 or a 14. Apologize, it's a 15mm. torque spec on these bolts, nuts, is 35 foot-pounds. Make sure you go back over your bracket and make sure those nuts are tight. Okay, now with all of this loose, it's really easy to get our oil lines on. So go ahead and proceed with that. Okay, now is an excellent time to start tightening up all your lines so everything's easy to get to. Okay, now we're going to clock everything into position. So we're just going to rotate this down until the center cartridge is sitting pretty much straight up and down. If you notice your line is tighter or looser, you can clock this up to 15 degrees either direction. Okay, now we're going to tighten up the compressor side, on the turbine side. And again, always make sure you go back over it with a ratchet. Okay, now we're ready to install our inner stage. So we want to make sure we don't forget about our O-ring. We just need to press this down into place. It is a pretty tight fit. Okay, we're going to grab our clamp, take the nut off of it. And then we're going to put this on, so you will still have access to this when it's all put together. Okay, one of the best tips I have is to grab some Windex and to spray it onto the pipe as well as onto your boots. The Windex will evaporate. Brake Clean will end up eating the the powder coat away. Otherwise, that's what I normally use on boots, but this will just go away with time. So now we're going to slip this on. I'm going to rotate it around. Slip the boot on to the compressor. Make sure it's fully seated. And then from here, just tighten your clamps up. We'll tighten the compressor cover up. And of course, make sure you go over it with a ratchet. And don't forget about your compressor cover. Okay, from here, you just need to go over all your bolts, make sure they're still tight, and all of your nuts, make sure they're still tight, or in the case of the hot pipe flange, we can tighten it up totally. And then we have one big thing still to do. We need to put the downpipe on. Alrighty everybody, the last big part of this equation we have to figure out is the downpipe. So here, we've got a couple of marks in the factory downpipe, well, in this aftermarket 4-inch MBRP, that we can kind of cross-reference by just setting the pipe up in place and kind of getting a rough idea, as you can kind of see here. What I would recommend is cutting a little bit less than you think you need unless you've got a pretty good eyeball. Me, I've never had a very good eye, so I usually cut once or twice. But I'm going to go ahead and cut it about 6 inches before the cross member. Or if you'd like, you can always just slip the downpipe out of the rest of the exhaust. This exhaust is fairly fresh, so I should be able to get it out. And then I'm just going to grab a 4-inch section of pipe to put in there. You also might need to remove this bracket that's sitting on the downpipe, because it holds it pretty rigidly. Okay, I've got a length of pipe here that's like the perfect length. So I'm going to put it in, I'm going to guillotine and clamp back it on, and then I'm going to just weld this back up so we don't have to worry about any leaks. And I'm just going to grab a flat strap clamp and attach it to the downpipe. Seems to be the easiest way I know how to do this. That's it. We just have to fill in this gap, put a strap over it, and this part is done. You do want to make sure that this flange is pretty flat. There is some adjustment in this turbo to make the flange go one side or the other. So just make sure that's pretty square, but really it's a pretty straightforward deal. Alrighty, so here I have the cab back down on the truck, and this AC line sits right where the downpipe is at. So it's going to come down right here. It runs right into it. Actually, it sits more off to the side of it. All we need to do is put a little radius in here to make it bend, kind of like you can see my finger moving. One other thing you have to play with is the dipstick. So originally the dipstick was sitting right about here. So you just have to bend it over. The tube just flexes and bends. You can just get it right into place. So don't worry about breaking this too much. You can just bend it right out of the way. One other thing we need to look at, you guys can see this AC line right here. So you can't even barely get a finger between it and the turbine housing. So I would highly recommend a heat blanket here. We are going to do our best to bend this out of the way. You can zip tie it just so that way it's way out of the way. But this is just minor bending. Don't have to worry about kinking anything. But these are the little things we have to do under the hood. It doesn't have to move a bunch. It just needs to move over a little bit. Okay, one of the last things we're going to do is take a crescent wrench. We're just going to bend the top of the receiver dryer. And like I said, you want to do this in little movements. We're not trying to break anything. We're just trying to get stuff so it's out of the way enough to not have issues. Alright, as everybody can see, this line is way too long to actually go onto that pipe. It is sitting way back there. So we actually need to pull this line off the heater core. And we need to trim it back to where there's only about an inch right here on this, protruding past the firewall. So you can just slip it back onto the heater core. So, get started on that. Okay, so we can see our bend right here. We're really going to cut it right about here where my fingers are at. And then we'll slip it back on. Alright, what we need to get to is this pipe. And we got to route it up to this pipe. So, I've already cut our heater hose off. We're just going to do a quick test fit. Hard to show you guys depth in this video, but this pipe, I can't even put 2 fingers behind it against the firewall. It's like right up against it. And actually I can get about 2 fingers. So it's about an inch off the firewall. So now what we're going to do, now that I know that it fits, is we're going to take the factory hose clamp that's still on here. I'm going to grab some vice grips and put them on. I'm going to slip the whole thing back there. Okay, then release, and then I'll grab our other clamp and throw it on this other pipe. Okay, what we're looking at here, this is an AC line that wraps around your condenser dryer right here. So what we need to do is the downpipe comes through right here and it hits the side of that line. So we really just need to push it over. I do have a tool. This is actually just a 1/2 inch conduit, electrical conduit bender that I pulled the handle off of. And you're just going to try and snake that up in there and just try and give it a little bend. The pipe is contacting it right there, right at about where that little label is at. So we just need to give it a little bit more bend and we'll be good to go. Alrighty, now since I've got a hand over here, Tim, the owner of the truck, who's getting all of this, the other salesman over here, is climbing underneath the truck right now, and he'll get that downpipe so I can make it sit just like that. Alrighty, last but not least, we've got the air intake boot. You will notice this one's going to look a little bit different than the one you guys get. All we've done is trimmed it, and it's to show you a little bit of a surprise we just found out on this build. So I'll show you here. But yet again, the Windex, spray a little bit inside. This all evaporates and doesn't hurt the turbo. It'll make slipping all this stuff on a lot easier. We have our nice little red coated pipe. Oh, I need to put this sensor in. Okay, now that we've got our sensor installed, we are going to want to be facing backward just because of how much clearance we're going to have. Show you guys what we're going to be doing here. You're also going to say, I have this little boot on here. This does not come with your kit. So this is part of the surprise. Yeah, the surprise is that this actually works with an Smb air filter. I didn't find this out until I had it all together and I had that air filter sitting there and I was like, I wonder if that'll fit. So, come to find out, it does. It takes a little bit of finessing. It's not a perfect fit, but it's dang close. And then from there, it's just tightening up all of your Allens. Make sure you go over all the nuts and bolts one more time on the turbo. Go drive it around, come back after everything's nice and warmed and heat soaked. Check everything again when you're able to get all the bolts, just because everything loosens up as soon as it kind of gets a little warm and expanded. But I mean, if you don't have an Smb intake, you don't need to worry about it. The filter just bolts on the end of it. This is just an open area, but it was kind of cool that we found out that this will work. So all you guys have an Smb, you can still reuse the box. So, I mean, as far as this turbo install goes, this is it. I mean, go out and rip it. I mean, it'll be a ton of fun. This setup makes 55 to 60 pounds of boost. Towing, generally 1250 EGTs with 45% overs, even 60% overs. With the right tuning, I mean, these things can make 700-800 horsepower. So, great, go out and have some fun. Alrighty, everybody, that's pretty much it for this build. I mean, we're basically ready to just throw some coolant in this thing, and let's go out and have some fun. I mean, this setup works really, really well for daily driving, towing, but it also makes an immense amount of power. I mean, you've seen our dyno runs with this thing. It's not a chill little setup. It's not just a towing setup. This is a very fun daily street setup that also tows extremely well. Like, if that's all you use the truck for, perfect. It'll work perfect for you. But if you want to be a hot rodder, also a perfect setup. It's not a hard install. Generally take a guy that's never done one before. I would say probably 5 hours in their driveway. I mean, it's not a long time. This is a pretty easy set to do. So get out there and get to work.